a podcast about amazing people from an incredible state. Amazing Arizonans with Mike Broomhead.
The point of Amazing Arizonans is just to tell stories of great people in Arizona, to learn more about them than we knew before. And joining us this week is Paul Penzone, former sheriff of Maricopa County. Thanks again for doing this.
Honored to be here.
It's very strange to see you not in a capacity of law enforcement. How is that for you?
Well, it's a little bit of an adjustment. I spent my entire adult life to some extent in the public safety realm. But I think it's important. I learned this a long time ago. And actually, when I was working narcotics, they had I don't know if it's a psychiatrist or psychologist come in and talk to you about the importance of making sure that your job is never 100% of your identity. It's something you do, you take pride in, but it shouldn't define you. So I was kind of felt like being the sheriff, I was on house money. It was the coolest job ever. Being in law enforcement, to some extent, was house money. But I didn't want it to define me. So now I'm just in a different role, getting back to the community. So it's the transition to this has been exceptional.
And I want to get to Blue Cross Blue Shield because I don't think that they could have picked a better spot for you than what you're doing. I think you're going to represent that aspect of what they do so well. But I want to go back to the law enforcement thing because you worked, what was your first year in law enforcement? When did you start?
1988, 89.
Okay, so you started in law enforcement. It was a different game back then. The city wasn't nearly as big, but how many years with Phoenix PD?
21 years.
Talk about that 21-year span. What did that do for you in your life and prepare you for everything you're doing now and the other things you've done since?
Well, what's interesting is I look back now as a father of two grown men, and at 21 years old, the fact that I was in law enforcement making decisions that some would say is the most powerful thing you can do. You are making decisions to potentially take someone's freedom in a free nation, deeming that what they did was in violation of the law. That's a big responsibility for a young person. And by the grace of God, I feel like I navigated that space for my own safety and for the responsibility pretty well. But it was a different time because there really was a foundation of inherent respect and appreciation, gratitude for the profession. And because that existed, the recruitment was off the charts. More people wanted in than there were positions available. So to work in a space where you knew going to work every day, the community appreciated it, you felt more empowered and you felt as though the job really had the purpose it should. As I leave the career now, I worry for this generation because I don't know if that same mentality exists in the community, therefore by, osmosis, by transition for those who are doing the job. And that is the most important element of the job.
My brother, as you know, is a captain in the sheriff's office in Florida, my hometown, and he's put it what I think very well. See if you agree with this statement. He said he didn't ever feel less safe, but he did feel less respected. Yeah,
and to some extent, I think that those things still exist in the same space. And not so much that your physical safety, but when you know that people believe in why you're doing what you're doing, it gives you a different element of courage because the purpose is so defining and clear. And when it's absent, someone told me early on, they said, your power doesn't come from those documents that you read, like the laws of the Constitution. They're very powerful documents. But your power comes from the belief that the people who give you that authority trust in you to be the caretaker of it. And when they start to question your integrity in doing so, it diminishes the courage that comes with the responsibility.
When you look at your time as a police officer, and I've had the privilege of meeting a lot of people, Phoenix PD and otherwise, and from a civilian point of view, there are a couple of jobs that are inherently more dangerous. One of them is narcotics, and the other would be gangs, which goes hand in hand with narcotics. Talk about your time in working narcotics and that danger. Looking back, what was that time like for you?
Well, it's interesting, Mike, because I actually did a short stint on a temporary assignment in gangs before I went to narcotics. And what I found interesting in gangs, extremely dangerous, very nuanced, but to see so many young adults with so much vitriol and disrespect for any authority, especially law enforcement, was disheartening. But in narcotics, I remember early on, you kind of had this test by fire. They would drop you off in a neighborhood that was inherently known for drug distribution and say, we'll be parked, half a mile down the road, don't come back until you've made your first purchase. And you had to figure out, one day, you smell, look, taste, walk, talk, everything like a cop. The next day, you're trying to behave as though you were a drug user to buy drugs. And it might have been, I was young and naive, but it might have been one of the scariest experiences ever until you kind of assimilate into that space and understand the dynamics of it, because it is a subculture like no other.
When it comes to gangs, what we've seen a trend, and I don't know if it's over the last 20 years or so, you would know better than me, it seems to be they're using younger and younger people, realizing the juvenile laws are different. Does that add an element as a police officer when now you're dealing with younger and younger people and trying to get them out of that life before it really ruins them?
It does, and I think it's a reflection on society, on just the lost value of what it means to be a parent, what it means to give your children an opportunity to succeed in the design that is this nation. That the playing field isn't fair. It's not even by any means, for some versus others. But in America, you still can overcome and accomplish greatness. But when parenting is absent and these young adults, their role models are those who are already embedded in gangs. They see it as a business model, and they know that you are nothing more or less than a cog in the wheel for their own benefit, and they're willing to sacrifice you for it. It is maybe one of the most disgusting abuses of young adults, and it is also sad because it is really, in the young adults' eyes, the only path that they have, the only environment where they feel that they are embraced and cared for. And it's inaccurate, but it's the reality.
When I began coaching, because my youngest brother was playing sports, the one that's a cop now, and I was 7 years older, and I was kind of the only father figure he really had, and I realized at a younger age that if I didn't straighten up my act, he was going to end up on the same path I was on. So in a way, trying to help him helped me. And for me, it was sports. And investing in young lives. For me, it was young men. Investing in these kids, teaching them teamwork and all that other stuff. And so many cops I know do exactly the same thing. They turn to coaching or what would be extracurricular activities to invest in kids' lives so that they're doing that off the job and not arresting them when they're on the job. Do you think that stuff works?
It does, absolutely. And it's basically the big brother, big sister model. They talk about the importance of, studies show that if a young adult has one person in their life, and in case you as the big brother, who are solely invested in the success of that young man or woman, the probability of success increases dramatically. It's a force multiplier. Absent that, what happens is young adults don't see in themselves what a complete stranger might see as their potential. You know how it is. If somebody says to you, what, Mike, you're really good at this job, and I think you can, the sky's the limit. You're going to become the best in the field, in the market. Suddenly you feel this courage, like if they believe and they see that in me, then I need to see it in myself. Absent that, your self-esteem is broken. So what you did for your younger brother, what anyone in a position of opportunity to do for a younger adult, because you care about their needs first and you're trying to help them reach that potential, that's how you change the world, one person at a time.
So let's talk about that in police work, because I'm interested because of all of your time, and I want to get to silent witness. But when did you feel that you crossed over from being someone that was mentored as a cop? Because everyone goes through FTO and you learn from the older generation. When you figured out younger cops were looking at you and the way you did things, was there a time you remember that happening?
I don't know if I was ever that cognizant. It's pretty interesting because I've always kind of lived by this credo, and I even tried to preach it when I was the sheriff, that everyone is a leader in the space that you exist. Like how you behave, you're leading by example, and someone else will learn from that and either aspire to be better, or you'll teach them bad habits, which will make them less. But I will tell you, if you don't mind me kind of winding the clock back, it was in high school when I learned the importance of the opportunities that you have in front of you and how you treat that moment. In other words, are you pushing that rock uphill with a smile on your face, or are you feeling sorry for yourself? I had a teacher, his name was Buzz Turner, I still remember, and I was a junior on varsity football, but I was lazy, bad work habits, bad practice habits, just showed up and let my athletic ability, for whatever it was, that was how I got by, not because of hard work. And the head coach didn't like it, and he kicked me down. He sent me down to JV. And when I went down to JV, the teacher's name was, and he was the coach, Buzz Turner, said to me, you can come down here and whine and feel sorry for yourself because you think you should be up on varsity, or you can show these other, primarily younger, sophomores and some juniors, what it means to be a leader by going out there and working even harder to prove yourself. And that life lesson stuck with me. So I don't know, in context of your question, that I was cognizant of what was going on around me, and I was never perfect by any means. But I always felt like if you're going to go to work and do something, you should believe in what you're doing. You should give it your best at all times. And then others will see that as motivation to be better versus make excuses, feel sorry for yourself, and look for the easy alibi. It's
interesting because I've only known you as a leader. I mean, I've only seen you in that aspect. Silent witness, when that's where we met, that you were already in a leadership position. So at some point you had to realize, when the things you say, that you were put in a position of authority and they were going to follow your example. And how much did that mean to you?
Oh, it's tremendous. The idea, and a big part of it is earned. The other part of it is just, I'll go back to the word courage. It's almost like a fear of, you're less worried about failure and you're more concerned about what you can do to lead others to success. And I think if you embrace that mentality, fear is almost selfish in nature. You're worried about your own reputation, your own pride. Courage is really, you're less worried about that and you see the benefit for others. But when someone does look up to you and says, I appreciate that you did what was difficult on our behalf. I appreciate that you took the hit for us so that we could do what needed to be done, absent that criticism or that obstacle. I don't know there's any greater place to be than for people to entrust in you that responsibility. But again, you have to see it as your opportunity to do more for others versus beat your chest and say, look at me, I'm in charge.
So the police work, you can see the value, at least I would think you could see the value, gangs, narcotics, and the other things where you're taking bad people off the street. The transition into silent witness, what motivated you to that position?
It was interesting because I had gone from narcotics, I promoted, and then I went to that position. And in narcotics, you see people who have lost their souls. You see the worst environments from the inside out. You are in the criminal element all the time, and you see it from that perspective. And you can become kind of calloused. And I felt like I needed a revival. And when I went to silent witness, you will sit down with a person, whether it's a mom or a dad, or maybe they're both present, or a victim, and they're going to share from their heart the tragedy of loss of a child, the circumstances where they were victimized. And if it doesn't, as I said, if it's not a revival for you, it reminds you why you got involved in law enforcement, to help that very person seek and hopefully receive justice. And justice will never fill the void for the hurt that they have, but at least it puts some closure in the idea that someone does care enough to hold someone else accountable. When I was in that space, I used to think to myself, there for the grace of God to go, if I was on the other side of the table and it was my loved one, what would I want from law enforcement? And sometimes that means, because oftentimes those who are victimized may directly or indirectly be involved in criminal behavior. They're using drugs, they're in prostitution, they're in gangs, whatever it may be, and that's why they were in the space where their life was taken or they were victimized. You can't be so cynical to go, well, it's their own fault, because our own children, our loved ones, our friends, our family could have made the same bad decisions, and you still care that justice is served. So silent witness for me was that time and space where it reminded me why day one I said, I want to help people. And then suddenly over the time, you're like, I'm only helping people go to jail. There's still the opportunity to help people, and you have to see the forest through the trees on it. Are
there any specifics of when your time there successful, where silent witness worked to get a family justice? Are there some of the stories that still live with you?
Oh, absolutely. And but the thing is interesting is when I was interviewed, when I retired from the Phoenix Police Department, they did a little story on silent witness and me. The ones that stick with you more so are the ones you didn't solve. The cases where Lindsay Chainault, killed in a road rage circumstance, and her mom, Judy, who's a wonderful, wonderful lady, that we were never able to solve that case. So instead of celebrating the victories, although they are fuel to carry you, it is the ones that were left undone that weigh heavier on your heart, I think.
Why is that?
Again, I think you put yourself in that place and you feel like you left somebody behind. You're a big military supporter and everything. You understand, like, you don't leave anybody behind. Mm-hmm. And for someone to have been victimized, or a family to have suffered a loss, and they still wake up every day knowing that the person responsible is out there living a free life potentially, and their loved one can never come back or never feel that justice was served. That is definitely a bigger emotional impact than the one moment of victory of we got that one.
So what motivated you? When did it click for you that you decided that you were going to enter a political race? Now, a law enforcement career still, but it's a political office. What motivated that?
I have to say this, and I say it in a thoughtful way, because I don't like disrespecting other people. When I interviewed to become a police officer in 1988, they said, why do you want to be a cop? And my answer was, I don't like bullies. And I always feel like if there's a bully, that someone has to have the courage to stand between the bully and the victim and say, it's not going to happen here. Because that person who's potentially vulnerable, you have to know that they need someone. You have to be willing to be that someone. So fast forward however many years, I'm watching my predecessor on TV, and I just feel like he behaved like a bully. He took that office, he intimidated people, he always made the credit about himself. He, on his best day, he walked the fine line with the law. On his worst day, he, potentially violated civil rights and did some other things. And I saw him on TV doing something, and what went through my head was, just because he's wearing a badge and a uniform, he's still being a bully to some extent. And I expressed that outward, and my wife said, well, then do something about it. And it's one of those defining moments that, if you think there's a wrong, are you willing to do what's necessary to make it right? Are you capable to do it the right way and to commit to it? Doesn't mean you're going to be perfect or that you're the best at it, but you're the one who's willing to walk on the hot coals or run through the fire to get it done. And that's what politics is. Politics is an ugly space, and we've allowed it to become even uglier, and that's shameful. But if you want to do good, sometimes you got to go through that ugly to get there.
I want to get back to that in a moment, but when you said, I hate bullies, I don't know do you know Jay Dobbins? Have you met Jay?
I know the name, but it doesn't ring.
Jay Dobbins spent his career with ATF, and he was the first federal agent to become a full patch member.
No, I do, because I remember the book and everything when he did the Hells Angels case.
Yeah, and so Jay and I have become friends, and I'm hoping to get him in here at some point because the story is incredible. When he was asked, he was a superstar wide receiver at U of A, just a great athlete. And when asked, when he speaks in public, it's his exact words, I became a cop because I hate bullies. That seems to be a theme in law enforcement.
It's a thread, without a doubt. For those who are doing it, I think, for the right reasons, there's a fine line. You can get drunk on the power and the authority. Like when I stepped away from being the sheriff, I want to make sure I didn't stay so long that I thought it became about me, because it is great. I'll call it power, but it's privilege. You are given a gun, a badge, and you are given the trust of the community to go out there and be at the highest ethics to enforce the law. And it's very easy to fall into a space where you could be abusive with it if you allow your emotions or subjectivity or partisanship to intervene in that. But ultimately, I think most people get in because they don't like to see someone harmed who needs to be protected, and you're willing to say, I'll sacrifice my safety for the safety of others.
So let's go back to what you talked about your predecessor, someone that for a very, very long time as the sheriff of Maricopa County was immensely popular here in the county. What was he first elected in 1994, I think, and was the sheriff for over 20 years and was immensely popular. Actually,
92, I think.
Was it 92?
Yeah.
But internationally known, because I didn't move here until 95, internationally known as America's toughest sheriff and immensely popular with a lot of people. Yeah. So you had to know going into that political race that the things you were saying were going to be met with some hostility.
I like how you the subtlety of some hostility.
Yeah, but were you prepared for what happened?
I don't know that you could ever say that you're prepared. It's just, are you willing to evolve and deal with whatever comes at you? Because you're going to be torn down, kicked, beat up, and thrown out. And I think I should have talked with you before. My first election cycle, middle of summer, 150 degrees in Arizona or whatever the heck it was, and we're out there knocking door to door, putting flyers on saying vote for Paul Penzone. And you'll meet with some folks that don't even know you, but for whatever reason they believe in you and they want to support you. So they're doing the same thing with you. And here I am, I'm like, why am I doing this? It's crazy. It's hot. It's miserable. The politics stinks. Like my first second guessing myself. And this little lady comes up to me. She happened to be Latina, and she was probably in her 70s. And she said, can I give you a hug? And I'm like, sure. I'm Italian. We hug anybody. I'll give you a hug. And I didn't seem the meaning in it other than she was just being kind. And then she said, thank you. I want to thank you for what you're doing. And it clicked with me. She didn't have to go any further. But for her, she lived in fear because she was Latina. And what was going on in this community at that time was abusive to people of color, people of brown skin. And she feared going out of her house every day. So what the hell is anybody going to do to me? Lie about me, attack my character, do whatever you want. It's not going to be worse than what she's going through, because the bully who's affecting her is far more dangerous than the bully who was coming after me. And when you realize that moment that it's not about you, then all the other politics are meaningless, because politics can only hurt you if you have such a big ego and so much pride in yourself that you think it's about you. But if you're truly committed to serving others and fighting the bully, then you're going to get punched in the mouth and you're going to have to punch back.
But you know what's odd, and I don't know if people know this, and I don't know how much of this you want to go into, but I know for a fact that despite of all that, and we're talking about Joe Arpaio, the former sheriff, you tried to mend fences. You've maintained a civil relationship with him.
Yeah, and I would tell you it's this kind of weird dynamic that, so you look at like Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier, right? Beat the heck out of each other in the ring. They all both had their own teams and their teams with them and understood all of the sacrifice. But at the end of the day, only two people go in the ring and understand what it's like to be the heavyweight champ. So when you have been part of the fraternity of being a sheriff, doesn't mean you agree, doesn't mean you like, and I can tell you I have disdain for things that he did. But there's still an aspect of it that comes with the service that you say, I still have to respect that in his way he was willing to make a sacrifice on behalf of the community. And I try to just be respectful and kind to others. So if I see him anywhere, I'll call and check on him, and he's been kind to me in ways, but don't confuse that with me agreeing with his tactics or his politics.
But do you think he has the same level of respect for you?
I don't like to share this, but I'm going to because it's so private. There was a defining moment. I'll tell you what the defining moment was. His wife passed away. God bless her, a special lady. And
she was an amazing woman.
Yeah. She happened to be a cosmetologist. My wife's a cosmetologist. Okay. So it's like this is just weird, I don't know what you would call it, just kind of similarity in that space. But I felt it was appropriate and no different from anybody else that we went and paid respects. So we went to the Rosary, which is the night before, everybody prays. And I wanted to make sure, first of all, I asked for his permission because I wasn't going to show up and be a distraction. So he knew that we had intended on coming if it was okay with him. And then when we got there, my wife and I, we sat in the back of the room. We showed up a few minutes late because I didn't want to walk in front of anybody and sat in the back of the room because I just wanted to be there for the right reasons, not to be like, oh, look, Paul showed up. And I was ready to leave immediately thereafter. And Joe, to his credit, came and found us and thanked us. And he still speaks about it to this day, how much it meant to him. And people there were like, that was so kind of you. I can't believe you showed up. And I said, why? Why is it exceptional? It should be the standard. And that's true. It should be just like you're thoughtful enough, kind enough to be there during a person's most difficult moment. Because that's what we should do as Christians, as Catholics, as people of faith, or just as people that have humanity in your heart. And for whatever reason, that obviously has resonated with Joe because it's common that I hear from people that he's friends with. They say, hey, the sheriff talked about when you showed up at his wife's, at the Rosary, and that meant a lot. So
that's one of the greatest examples I think I wish more people knew about. And I'm sorry, you have reasons for not sharing it. But in the world that we live in right now, the example of there are certain things that transcend politics, that transcend any animosity, and that's one of them. I would hope that I had that ability, that I would say, I don't like this or that about that person, but at a time of deep crisis and sadness, that I would say it's important for me to let them know that in spite of everything else.
You know what's really selfish about it, though? And I mean this, for the right reasons. It is a defining attribute of yourself, right? So when I say that respect is what you give, it's not what you get. And just because a person has behaved in a certain thing, that doesn't give you the right to fall to that space or to behave that way. You have to rise above it and still try to lead by example. So the reason I say that it's selfish is because I want to be a person who rises above that and does the best I can to be thoughtful and caring because that defines who I am. So it had nothing to do with him. To some extent, it had to do with what is the right thing to do in that circumstance because of who I am. And I think it sounds arrogant to say it that way, but I should tell the troops, you're going to come across really bad people. They're going to say things about your family. They're going to want to beat you up. They've done horrible things. They've harmed people in the community. But how you treat them defines who you are and what you believe in, not who they are and what they've done. And that's a hard battle to fight. But gosh, every day you got to pull up your boots and work hard to stay true to it.
Let me tell you a story about that. I was in a very small room on the 10th anniversary of 9/11. It was a big event that we were putting on a fundraiser for the 10th anniversary. And I was at a small VIP function. I was the MC. And there was this young captain in the Army. I didn't know him. His name is Kelly Hillier. He's now retired from the military. And my friend said, you got to hear this story. And Kelly began to speak. He was a young MP, just got out of college, was cooking at Applebee's, I think, and took his commission and decided to go in full-time in the Army and was sent to the Middle East. First platoon, first time in command. And while they were there, they said, we've got a mission for you. Shipped him on buses across Iraq. Gets there and they say, tomorrow morning you're gonna meet your mission. You're gonna do what what you're here for. Next day they walk him into a room in an 8x10 cell with Saddam Hussein, and it was his job and his platoon's job to get him to court for 51 or 52 weeks. And during that time, Kelly said, people would ask me, why are you nice to him? Why do you treat him that way? And he said, I think that's what my president would expect of me. It's exactly what you're talking about. How you treat someone, even that evil, is a reflection on who you are, not on who they are. And I've never forgotten that. To hear you say that, first thing I thought about was Kelly Hillier.
Yeah. The only thing I would say differently, and no disrespect, that's what my Lord expects of me.
Yes.
You know, and I respect what he's saying.
But at that time, because he was a soldier.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. So I don't mean that, but it's, you know, you have to live by that credo. You know, you can't make excuses. That's why one of the things that I discussed with my predecessor once is I said, you know, he felt differently about how you run a campaign and what politics is. And I said, politics doesn't define us. We define it. We get to choose what it should look like, feel like, how it should treat others, and how we should behave. And that's where our nation is lost right now. We've fallen into this space where we think that politics justifies and excuses dishonesty and bad behavior because it's for a greater good. Because if I can get into office, then I can do the right thing, and that person won't. Therefore, I can lie, cheat, and steal to get there.
The end justify the means.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, to me, that tears the fabric of your ethics, your integrity, and the privilege that you should have to be in that office. Because once you're in an office, you are there to serve everyone. Doesn't mean you're going to be agreeing with everyone, or they're going to be agreeing with you, or you can do what everybody wants you to. But it does mean that you're committed to do the greater good for everyone. And if you believe that a partisanship or any politics justifies anything other than that, then shame on you. It's not about you serving others. It's about you being served, and you shouldn't be in public service.
The expectation, I don't think you enter an election, you don't get involved if you don't have an expectation that you can win. But being here for as long as I had been here, if you were to ask anyone in the state of Arizona, you got to bet your last dollar on someone that will win re-election. The money you would put it on for a long time would have been John McCain and Joe Arpaio. Both completely different people, but they were the two that were just a lock to win their office again. What do you think changed that, and what was it that made you believe that you could go into that race and beat him?
Well, I think circumstantially I benefited. You know, he had overstayed his welcome. He had done some things that were unforgivable. He had cost the community a lot of money. So there were some factors that I'm not going to pretend like it was, you know, I was so wonderful. There were elements that the timing of my pursuit of the office worked. But I also believe that I was the right person at the right time from this context. Bravado is a very powerful thing, right? For what, you know, some people think it defines leadership. I don't necessarily. I think confidence and conviction really are more valuable than bravado. But bravado can be like a facade for those things. And I would say that my predecessor was the king of bravado, and people love that. Like, if, you know, it wasn't so much what he did as what he said he was going to do. So I've never entered anything, a competition, a fight, a sporting event, no matter, I could be playing tomorrow, against, whoever, Michael Jordan, and I'm going to tell you I'm going to beat him in basketball. I got no shot, but I'm going to go in it that way. So I just think that what helped me was being a stable, thoughtful person whose words resonated with people because they were true. And I'd like to think that my career reflected a person. Like when people say, "Well, you want your legacy to be?" I said, "I don't really know that I want a legacy, but I'd like to say straight shooter." Because you ask me a question like this, you're going to get a straight answer. A lot of people in marketing or PR would say, that's not a good way to say it. Right. I want you to say you're a steady hand. I think I gave people a steady hand during a time when things were unsteady.
Let's talk about some of the changes, and maybe this is too much in the weeds, but you made some significant changes when you went into that office. You got rid of the tent city, which for a long time was very popular and a signature thing that the sheriff did, and you kind of revamped how the jail system worked here in Arizona. And I know that we've talked about this. A lot of this had to do with money and how much money was being spent. But how did that affect the people that worked for you? For people that had worked under that sheriff, for many of them, their entire careers, to watch those changes happen, how did it affect the agency?
Well, I think for some, because there were a lot of detention officers that really liked working out in Tent City. It gave them a little more freedom. You were out and about, so they didn't like the idea of it. And I had to help them understand why it was in the best interest of the organization and the community. And that requires earning trust, and that takes time. There were some that all they knew was one form of leadership. So no matter what I said or did, they were so convicted by believing in that I wasn't going to change their minds. But I don't enter anything thinking it's my job to change your mind. I just go into it with the attitude, you may not like me, but you answer to me as the sheriff because I answer to the community as the head of this office. So you're working for the community, and my job is to manage you. So every time I had a tough decision or tough challenge, I tried to be pragmatic and analytical. I tried to remove anything that was political or partisan in nature. I tried to make sure that it was completely objective. And going through that process, what was the decision to be made? And if I really felt like I did my homework and the decision was predicated with those philosophies or those foundations, then I felt good about it. And when you feel good about why you're doing what you're doing because you know it to be true, not best for you, not best for politics, not best for something else, but just true, then, you end up looking more forward than backwards and second guessing it. And you stand a little taller, you stand a little stronger because you know what you're rooted in. And eventually people will come along. And if they're not going to, then, it's probably the wrong place for you, because I'm going to stay consistent in who I am and how I lead. And
the way that originally started, if you were listening to the former sheriff's perspective, is that it had to deal with crowding in
complete
the
legitimacy.
And so what he said was, and he hung up the vacancy sign at the Super Bowl. And that if we've always going to make room for you. So it was old Army tents surrounded by the fence and the razor wire and everything else. And he used to say to the inmates when they would complain about the heat, he would say, our troops in Iraq are sleeping in the same conditions and they haven't broken the law. And people cheered that. People loved that stuff. But at a time when you took over, you're saying it was a different space and there was more room inside the jails. It was more cost effective.
Safer for detention officers.
Was it really about all of that, or was it about getting rid of the remnants of the reputation?
No, it was. I even empowered a group of business leaders to come in and do their own evaluation of CEOs and say, you give me your recommendation as a business decision. If you told me that it really reduced recidivism and it had some kind of other tangible outcome for the benefit of the community, maybe my decision would have been different. Now, the pink underwear was definitely just nonsense. I got rid of that anyway. But the tent was really about a business decision.
Wait, hang on. Before you go into people, we've got to realize that we know the backstory, and a lot of people don't. Oh, yeah. Joe Arpaio, the Sheriff Arpaio, used to issue, because the inmates were stealing the underwear. So
they dyed them pink.
Gave them all pink underwear.
Which was, again, just like the tents, it had legitimacy when the decision was made, but then it became political when the legitimacy of why you did it no longer existed.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify when you said.
But I want to give you an apples to apples comparison. During COVID, do you know that the sheriff's office faced considerable lawsuits from the ACLU and some others?
Yes, I do.
And the lawsuit was over what, Mike? Do you remember?
Over the masks? Oh, no, it was about the crowding.
No, it was about anybody whose health could be endangered by COVID should be released from jail.
Right.
And I said absolutely not, because the circumstances outside the jail are no different than the circumstances inside the jail when it came to the health pandemic. And don't get political on me about COVID A, B, C, was it real, was it not? I'm just saying in general, there was a health pandemic, and inside the jail, there were organizations that were suing me to say, you need to let anybody go free who has any potential for a respiratory
obesity,
issue, whatever. It was across the board. And I said, zero chance of me doing that. And we implemented so many thoughtful steps for enhancing safety and health inside the jail system that by the time it got to court, like 2 years later, we gave the ACLU and attorneys full access to the jails on a regular basis, literally creating opportunity for them to enhance their lawsuit if it was legitimate. And two judges, the two lawsuits, one was substantial, a class action, and another one was by a different attorney. In both cases, the judges said, this organization has gone above and beyond to ensure the health and safety of the inmate population. There's no basis for your lawsuit to say that anybody should have been let free. So I could have taken the easy path and said, it's COVID and all these excuses are going around, I'm going to let criminals go free. Absolutely not, because I am in the business of investigating crime, or I was, holding criminals accountable, abiding and enforcing the law, and making sure if you go to jail to serve a sentence, you serve that sentence. So do not for a minute think that his decision with Tent City in many ways was different than my decision during COVID. It's just the circumstances changed both situations, but I never let somebody go free just because.
And you can't mitigate 100% of the risk because you lost detention officers during COVID. That was a time that there was still a risk that all of us faced. It was no different than anybody else out there. But to make sure that and I remember bringing you on the show to talk about that, the judges were so much on your side, they made it a point to say there's no basis that you've gone above and beyond, and you were still able to keep the jails as safe as possible and not let anybody go.
Yeah.
That was an incredible victory because, there weren't a lot of victories in law enforcement at the time.
But again, it is a thoughtful, pragmatic, I'll say business decision, but I was in the business of law enforcement and incarcerating those who have committed crimes, and I stayed true to that commitment. Politics be damned.
So let's talk. I went in-house with the sheriff's office. At that time, you inherited what we would call in Phoenix a consent decree that's being contemplated. You and I talked about you leaving the office. You came on the show and talked about this, where the Department of Justice and an overseer, someone that came in, their job was to oversee parts of your agency and try to gain or put you back on track to what they said was sufficiency. Is that correct about what that's what
in a nutshell?
Okay. And in the time that when Sheriff Arpaio was there and the entire time that you were there, it never crossed that bridge. They're still there monitoring that agency. What can you say about that?
The system's broken. The system of oversight, I don't even say it's broken. I would say it's flawed because you have to get it right first before you can break it. And I don't think it's ever been, right. And here's why. There's absolutely a need for intervention when law enforcement exceeds their authority and loses the trust of the community because they violated laws, rules, policies. I am not going to argue that is appropriate because we should answer everybody and anybody, especially if there are failures. But I have not seen a model where in any agency across the nation, an intervention led that community and that organization to a place where they were better after the fact. And here's the fundamental aspect of it. So who was the DOJ? The DOJ is attorneys, right? Attorneys fundamentally don't run organizations. They don't even really manage a staff of people. They don't investigate crimes fundamentally. There may be occasions where they're special counsel and they pretend to be investigators, but they're not investigators by trade. They evaluate information and facts. Exactly. So now you have Department of Justice attorneys who are relatively young, and they're going to come in and they're going to investigate a law enforcement agency and then tell you how you should run it, having never run it. And because it's more than just cleaning it up, it's still ensuring that you keep the safety of the community as your priority. And then once they come up with this structure and they stay embedded, then they hand it off to a private company, private entrepreneurs, and pay them $300-400 an hour each to come in and implement these rules and be the decision makers, the judge, jury, and executioner of whether or not you've met that criteria. Who in the world fires themselves from a job paying that kind of money? And I'm not trying to allude to corruption or anything like that. I'm just saying that the financial implication in the manner in which you implement it, there are conflicting aspects to it. And I don't believe that we've created a formula that is appropriate for the need. And that therein lies the rub.
Do you have off the top of your head a number, just your time in the sheriff's office, of what the county spent on that independent monitor?
Well, the odd thing is, so it was 2013, I think, when the orders first came out, but they weren't fully 2013. And then again, there was another one after that. Full implementation actually happened just by timing when I arrived there. Like my predecessor and his team, really, they only had inception, but they really weren't under the full control of the monitors. So it's $250 million in that time frame.
That could have been spent in real public safety. Yeah.
Now, to be fair to it, there are more aspects of the spend that were necessary, improving technology and policies and things of that nature. So there are elements that under the right leadership could have, should have, and would have been implemented. But then there are other expenses that are definitely extravagances that I think it came to the detriment of taxpayers.
Well, you were pretty outspoken, and the reason why I brought it up is because Phoenix is facing, or has been pushing back, saying we've made changes, but you were pretty emphatic and you were outspoken and very public, my show and other places, saying that Phoenix was doing the right thing, basically, by pushing back against this. What made you decide to say that?
Well, I live in this community. I pay taxes, and I know it from the inside out, and I just felt like it would have such detrimental implications if the two of the largest law enforcement agencies in Maricopa County were both under federal court oversight, because I saw the decline in productivity in my own agency because people were so fearful of the more work you do, the more scrutiny you face, the more likely it is that you're going to be punished for something, that was, a decision in the moment. And how that will affect our ability to manage crime and public safety in this community would be adversely impacted for years to come. So does Phoenix need things to improve? I don't know. I'm not on the inside looking out. But if they do, are there other options that are more viable, more impactful, more sustainable, not giving, again, DOJ attorneys in a private firm that kind of leverage. And I want to say this because, to be fair, I'm not going to sit here and say that anybody that was a monitor on our team at MCSO is a bad person or not qualified or whatever it may be. I just don't believe that the formula which is implemented truly gives enough accountability for that team as much as it does accountability for the sheriff's office. And if you want to have a better formula, then you have to take out influences that could impact your decision making, like, no deadlines, no hard out. If somebody's building your house and you say, let me know when you're done, they're going to take a long time if you're paying them by the hour, right? If you say you got to get it done by this time frame, otherwise we're going to bring a different contractor in and do it that way, then those are some of the rules that DOJ tried to implement for consent decrees, but they didn't apply the same implementation to our oversight. That didn't make sense to me. Yeah,
and the other part of it for me as a taxpayer is you look at Oakland, California, over 20 years under a consent decree. Maricopa County Sheriff's Office.
Hold on, before you go further, how many police chiefs in Oakland during that time frame?
Wasn't it like 13?
Yeah, I think it was 12 or 13. And
one of the chiefs is now suing for wrongful termination.
Yeah. So the city has chosen 12 new leaders from the one who was responsible for the failures, and none of those leaders were equipped or talented enough to bring that agency into a better place than those who probably don't even live in the community that are overseers. That to me just fundamentally doesn't make sense.
And as a taxpayer, I would say if you owned a business and you said we're kind of floundering in some areas, we're going to bring in some consultants to assess our business. Yeah. If 10 years later they were still there without answers, you would question their ability to solve the problem.
Yeah. No, and I would try to say, this may be self-serving, but in this community, I'd like to think that the voters felt pretty strongly in the new direction, and there was an expression of gratitude and confidence that had been absent for some time. It was absent prior to my opportunity to be the sheriff. And I'm not saying I solved all the problems, but what I'm saying is the people spoke and wanted to give me a chance to solve the problems, and a lot of that was stifled.
So let's talk about another change you made that was, I wouldn't say controversial, but it certainly was newsworthy, was when you decided to bring in detection devices for drugs. Yeah. That with the deaths and the overdoses from fentanyl, it was affecting some of your corrections officers, but you also decided that it was going to be employees that wouldn't go through the same monitors as visitors or inmates, but they would go through a monitoring or they would go through a detection system. That was a little controversial to some. Why that decision, and how has it panned out since you did it?
Yeah, so it wasn't just that decision. It was so holistically, we had a severe problem of fentanyl in the jails, which is still a problem. We had suicides and overdoses due to those factors, and it was, I hate to use the word catastrophic because it sounds so, but it was substantial, and we had to take substantial steps to offset it. Now, we knew that one detention officer was arrested for trying to bring drugs into the jail. We had another one who was a part of an investigation by another agency involving drugs. So now suddenly you have people within your own ranks who are violating the law and jeopardizing the safety of your people. So the step wasn't about the masses. The step was about the smaller volume of people who are jeopardizing safety, jeopardizing reputation, breaking laws, and conflicting with the mission. So how do you stop that? You stop that by heightening the accountability, and you ask your employees to understand that when you have ethics and you have integrity and you come to work to do the job the right way, there's nothing you fear when it comes to showing people you're deserving of that privilege.
Did they agree with you, though?
Majority did. You know what? I think that they were concerned initially because they didn't understand the implementation. But once we did, and they saw that it was non-intrusive, that it didn't take up any more time than it should have, and it kind of changed the landscape of accountability for our own. But the other thing that we did that didn't get talked about as much is I went out and purchased 4 new dogs and put them in the jails, and only, and there was a debate from my team, like, should we get dual purpose dogs, ones that can bite and sniff? Or I said, no. I only want these dogs to be the best there is at finding drugs, sniffing out drugs. And I was told just recently again that one of the dogs hit on a female inmate coming in who had over 200 pills in a body cavity, and the dog hit at it at entry of the jail system. They were able to stop it there because of the effectiveness of the dog. So what I'm trying to say is it was a comprehensive response to a complex challenge, a complex issue. But sometimes you got to buy into something that's uncomfortable if you want to make positive change. And that's all I asked the employees, and I thought they were great about it.
There's been some controversy on different things in law enforcement, the implementation of body cameras, which I know in your time in law enforcement, you saw that happen. And there were a lot of cops that had privacy concerns because it's recording. You hit a button and it goes back 30 seconds. They were concerned about their conversations being monitored. There were concerns from cops saying, we have proven ourselves to be trustworthy, and now you're showing us that you don't trust us. This had the same connotation from some. Do you believe that just like with body cameras, after a time, that they saw it as a tool that was worthwhile to prove their trustworthiness as opposed to questioning it.
Yeah, I think those things are all cultural. I think that when like in the consulting world for safety and security, you have your risk assessment. You go, here's your risk. It's way high. And if we implement everything possible, we can mitigate the majority of those risks. But that might not be your comfort level. You might say, I'm only going halfway. Okay, I only want to do half the things you're suggesting. You're okay, but you have to own the half that you're not willing to mitigate. And if you're okay with that, so be it. That's what culture is when it comes to these types of decisions. It is, who do we want to be as an organization? Are we willing to be uncomfortable so that it promotes safety and health and in the best interest of all the people, our employees, as well as those that we have to care for? Or do you want to set the standard lower, knowing that you're going to have adverse circumstances, you're going to have implications and consequences that you could have prevented, but that's who you want to be. You make a conscious decision on who you want to be as a culture. And for me, as a leader in any capacity, I say there's no more important standard than ethics and commitment. And commitment means doing what's uncomfortable so it's for the betterment of others. And I think in the sheriff's office, over time, the majority of the people that I spoke with felt good about it because what it represented in the public was a higher standard, but meant higher appreciation and gratitude for what we were doing.
I want to go back to the politics of things because running for a partisan office, whether it's the sheriff or the attorney general, your job is not a political office. So that your political motivations should really have nothing to do with your job. But at some point, you have to deal with people on your side of the aisle and on the other side of the aisle. So you run as a Democrat against Joe Arpaio, a staunch Republican. Did you get pushback from the Democratic Party about the way you did things? Because I know the Republicans did. I know the Republicans pushed against some of the things you did. Because you took politics out, did you get pushback from people on the other side that thought you should have done things on the other extreme?
Yeah, but it really was just more so. I hate to use the term fringe because it makes people sound like they're outside the boundaries or something, but it was really the more extreme space of conservatives as well as liberals, who I heard from most frequently what they were unhappy about. But I would tell you that moderates in both spaces all the way up to the middle, very little to complain about. But no, I had Democrats, liberal Democrats, upset about decisions that I made. But as long as I can look at myself in the mirror and say that decision is directly aligned with my responsibilities as a sheriff and enforcing the laws of the state and being a guardian of these responsibilities, and I was okay with it.
Well, the reason why I brought it up is there was a controversy about the way you were handling illegal immigrants that were being arrested in your jail and how they were being released. I laugh because I still remember,
and this is early on in our, friendship, Mike, but you said, this is just weird because outside the jail right now, there are liberals protesting the sheriff and there are Republicans defending him.
Right, and that was it. So there was that real dichotomy outside of the Sally Port going into your building where Republicans were complaining that you weren't holding people long enough and cooperating with Border Patrol or with ICE. Yeah. And then you had liberals standing outside the jail saying you're wrongfully detaining people that deserve to be set free. How do you deal with that issue? Do you just do what you know is right and let the chips fall where they may?
No, so there are rules and laws that you have to be versed in and study to understand what your authority is. So first and foremost, I had a very effective county attorney who said, Paul, we're being sued for these, I'm trying to think what they even call administrative holds or something from ICE for these reasons, a violation of the Fourth Amendment. We can't do it anymore. Okay, a conservative county attorney tells me we're breaking the law, we're going to get sued. I'm not a guy who's going to break the law. Number two is this, and this is really important to me. I believe in our nation. I believe in what it means to have this privilege of citizenship. Some are born into it, some earn it. But at the end of the day, it has a value. It's not like a value if you put $1 down, you buy 9. It is a value that we believe in, that is defining of who we are as a nation. And when we have unlawful immigration, what that's saying is, and if we don't enforce the laws, first and foremost, we're in conflict with the very things that we claim are principles of ours. Secondarily, we're diminishing the value of citizenship because if it's not something that has standards and has requirements, then we've defied who we are as a nation of order.
Right.
So for me, I go, it's not my job to enforce federal law, but it is my job to be a good law enforcement partner to those who do, to promote safety and to ensure that those who are entering unlawfully still have due process. So if you've entered unlawfully and you're arrested for a state crime and you have to go in front of a judge because you've also violated immigration law, that is due process. And the truth of the matter is this: those people who went through that process now may be in a position to justify their action and earn citizenship down the road. But to put a blind eye to it means that I'm neglecting my responsibilities and my duties, whether it is state or federal law, because I'm still a partner to those federal agencies. So when I made the decision, it was, are we violating the law? And if so, we're going to stop doing it. Do we have an opportunity to facilitate a safe process for our federal agents who are responsible for these other laws? And are we also making sure that we protect what is most pure in our nation, which is citizenship, to ensure that the standards are still held high, like everything else I described? I didn't see it as a difficult decision at all.
But you were caught in the middle, because what people may not remember is a judge said that if I say you're released, you're released. And holding them a minute longer is in violation of state law.
Correct.
And the federal law says if you've been arrested...
Federal law, too. I mean, civil rights violation.
But if you also are being arrested for an immigration charge, and they wanted you to say, well, hold them on an immigration charge, you said, well, they haven't been charged with that yet. It put you in a bad spot with... what am I doing?
Oh, only one entity. And it's funny because I still remember there was an individual, too, who tried to attack me that happened to work for ICE. And I thought it was so childish because he kind of took the social network and was trying to attack me. I said, no. I am telling you, we will facilitate the lawful transfer of this inmate to your custody. But what I'm also telling you is it's not my job to violate the law nor to transport them to you. Do your own damn job. Right? So you're a federal agent. Come and get them at the jail. I will turn them over to you in the Sally Port in a safe manner. We'll give you a heads up so you'll know when they're going to be released. And we are adhering to the laws. We're protecting people's civil rights. We're enforcing the laws, and we're ensuring that the immigration law is properly implemented. So in the early stages, there was a rub because people were trying to define me as political when I wasn't. They were trying to question my legal acumen, which they shouldn't have. And in the end, the process turned out to be the most effective one in the nation.
It was kind of like being on the ocean, because when you're on top of the ocean, the waves are pretty big. When you're under the water, you don't know what's going on up there. So out inside the jail and what you were doing seemed orderly. But outside, it was chaos for a while.
Sure. But that was one of those things, early stages, new sheriff. I had been the sheriff for a month, I think, when that whole thing unfolded. Biggest decision I had to that moment. And had that decision happen 3 years later, probably less controversy because people would have known who I was as a leader, and I would have had a track record of being credible. But it was early on, and people want to be political, and I just weathered the political storm. I rode on top of the wave instead of getting under it.
Yeah.
And in the end, I think we worked out okay.
So let's talk about your decision not to run for re-election, because you got re-elected. Chances are you would have been re-elected again. I don't know who would have run against you, but you're
not going to put me in that category like you did before, like with Senator McCain.
Well, I would say to you that you had seemed to be that, yes, you were someone that had a very high likelihood of re-election.
I'm just teasing.
Well, what I mean, though, is because you don't know who was going to run, but it wasn't as if you were looking at poll numbers and just looking at the obvious.
I wasn't fearful that the community would have been kind enough to give me a third term.
Right. So what goes into the decision to not only say I'm not going to run for re-election, but to have the forethought to say I'm going to leave early enough so that the people that want to run have enough time to build their campaigns in both parties to run?
Yeah. So the first one was the decision myself, and it was one where I sat back and I just, third term, what does that look like for me? Personally and professionally? Do I believe that truly I can make changes that will be impactful in that office while still under federal court oversight? Or has it gotten to the point now where I've stretched this rubber band as far as I can and it's going to snap if I stretch any further because they're not giving me the latitude to make the changes I would like? That was an absolute, and that was part of the decision. The bigger part of the decision was, I'm not a young man anymore. The job had been incredible to me. I loved every moment of it, but 2 terms is a pretty good run. Most police chiefs, I think the average length of police chief is like 3 years, right? So I'm like, do I want to do a third term? And if so, what does it look like for me personally and professionally? And then it's like, at this stage of my life, if I want to do something different, what do I want to do? I still want to be involved in the community. I still want to be involved in giving back. I want to do things for my own family. So in the private sector, does that opportunity exist? And I made one phone call. That was it. And I talked to the CEO. Her name is Pam Cahaley, and she's incredible, head of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Arizona. And I said, Pam, I'm seriously considering not running for a third term. If I didn't run for a third term, do you think there's any probability that your organization would have a place where I can be involved in the community and doing something good? And she said, well, let's talk about it, because I definitely think that there's a possibility. So my decision was really already rooted that I wasn't going to run again, but I still got to find a job, and a job that feels good. And Blue Cross Blue Shield, what they're doing for this community is amazing. I'm overseeing the charitable giving and the community program. So I'm invested in the very issues that I was enforcing as a sheriff. Now I'm trying to seed solutions for those things with the Blue Cross Blue Shield of Arizona resources. So they're the power behind it. I'm just a conduit to try to help it along with an exceptional team that they have in place already. So that's where I landed.
If it hadn't been Blue Cross Blue Shield, would you have reached out to other organizations, or was that kind of the standard for you?
It was the standard for me. It doesn't mean that I had a buddy, he owned a store, and he sold like Persian rugs and art, right? And I asked him, I go, how do you know? Because there's no other item like this in the market. How do you know how to price it? He goes, you know what it's worth? Well, somebody's willing to pay for it. Mm-hmm. I just try to figure what that looks like. So for me, it was like, my worth is in the job market. I don't know. Somebody's willing to, I don't want to say pay for it, because that sounds like it was monetary in nature, but is there an organization out there with a desire to utilize my skill set in their space for the betterment of the community? And if all the answers were no, then I would have been like, well, maybe I better work a little bit harder at sheriff and figure out some things.
But isn't it also...
But I did work pretty dang hard.
But it is also... you also have to work for an organization that has the same value system that you have. I mean, you don't want to take your values into some place where you're curious about theirs. It has to be an organization that you respect their values.
Yeah, you cannot bend on that. It has to be a place where I'm very purpose driven, and I knew enough about their culture. I knew enough about her leadership style and her commitment to purpose and serving this community, because they're not. They may be an insurer fundamentally as their core duty, but they are a caregiver to the community. What they do in outreach and funding and opportunities to try to promote wellness, so that you're not paying the tab at the doctor's office or at the hospital, that we're trying to keep you well before you even get there, speaks volumes to what her vision was for the organization. So for me, it was purpose. It was like I could see in that culture thriving. I can see I don't have to bend or break on any of the things that I believe in principally, and I can see an opportunity for the next 10 years to be invested in this community in a different capacity and still do great things, or be a part of doing a lot of good outside of law enforcement.
You've now separated from law enforcement for a little bit of time. Do you miss it?
No, I would tell you, I ask that a lot. The only thing I miss, there's a saying, like, if a bear comes to the door, who's going to fight the bear? I'm the guy who say I'm going to fight the bear, even though at this stage of my life, I'm going to fight as long. So if something goes south, you always kind of have that yearning, like, man, I should be on the front lines with the troops fighting this battle. So I think that part of me is just inherent of my nature. I do miss, like, I was at a school yesterday on behalf of Blue Cross Blue Shield, actually with Dr. Oz on some programs they're working on, a nonprofit he has called Health Course. And it's just trying to get kids more actively involved in exercise and nutrition and things of that nature. Being the sheriff, you'd show up in uniform and hand stickers out and just get a chance to interact with kids and be inspirational. That was awesome, buddy. That was the best part of the job, where you go to the hospital and you visit with a patient, or you go to Phoenix Children's Hospital. Like, those community-based opportunities, because you had the platform of sheriff, that's hard to replace. But I'm trying to find a way to do other things that is still the same level of impact and outcome, just not wearing the uniform.
My brother's getting towards the end of his career. He's got about 25 years on. He's a captain, which means he's a watch commander. We had a big incident in my hometown. You may have heard the story last week, where a bank robber took hostages. Yeah. And the SWAT team took out the suspect, saved the lives of the hostages. My brother was the incident commander on that scene. And the idea, and we haven't talked much about it, but in his head, I know him well enough, the idea that something like that would happen in our county and he would not be running to solve that problem is foreign to everything about him. For as many years as you've spent running to save lives and running to take care of other people, how do you shut that off? I mean, when you hear the lights and sirens, or you don't have the radio anymore, where you're hearing what's happening, how do you shut that off?
Yeah, it's not easy. And I look at it from just a really fundamental space, my own family. If there's going to be a threat out there that could affect my family, I want to be the one fighting the bear. This one will be controversial. I'll give you the example, though, and it shouldn't be. Election security. Election security should not be political. Protecting, people's rights to vote, protecting to ensure that the ballots are lawful and counted appropriately, like protecting the elections officials or those that work in that space from threats and danger. Doing what we did in Arizona, in Maricopa County specifically, during that time when we were under a microscope and under the gun, was the bear at the door. And I'm the guy who's going to go fight the bear. So stepping aside to say it's your fight now is not my nature. So and when the bell rings, I'll still be like, man, do I got to, maybe I should go. But you also got to realize that you got to trust in other people, that you've had a succession plan in place, that you've mentored others, that are those you've never even met before, but they're so darn skilled and they're in the space that they're even better at it than you are. And then, you keep it close to home. You always make sure you're looking out for your own family. I'm
glad you brought that up because I hadn't talked about that with you here. But it's worth kind of going at a little bit because there were people, the County Board of Supervisors, Bill Gates was very vocal about how it affected him being attacked as he was in the media and some people coming after him. Clinton Hickman had over 100 people at his house and people showing up at his door with flyers dressed like chickens and all these other things that were going on that could have turned bad. There was somebody that was arrested, convicted, and jailed for making threats against his life. You're the sheriff of Maricopa County, that you had to protect those people, but at the same time, you're right. You also have the expectation that if there's any illegality going on with the election system, you're the guy they're looking to. How did you walk that line knowing that you had people on both sides of the political arena here that they were out and saying something's got to be done to stop both sides?
Well, we had, people on both sides of the political aisle in the organization. Okay, so I'm dealing with real people that have real families and affiliations, everything else, religion, whatever it may be in our organization. It's a very diverse organization. So I start there and I go, okay, what is our mission and how do I ensure that the people in the organization understand that why we're doing what we're doing is the right thing to do? Because they feel different ways, right? Some may thought like, oh, the election was stolen. Other ones thought there's no way in the world it was. And they wear the same uniform as we do. So when we made those decisions, it was pretty fundamental. Like, at the end of the day, we have a job to do. And all these other factors, whether they are political or subjective or objective or whatever, that could impact or influence our decision-making, have to be shelved. You cannot come to work with any of those factors influencing how you do what you do. But you got to trust in me, and I will show you why that this decision we're making on how we're going to implement at the recorder's office, at the tabulation center, at the polling sites, at the drop boxes, at elected officials' homes, everything that we do is going to resonate across the nation to say that this organization rose above the standard to say it's not going to happen here in Maricopa County because we stand for something greater and we're going to protect democracy, people, rights, privileges.
But there were people that were accused of being in on it. You were one of them, that you were a part of the cover-up. How do you answer that? Because there are people that are never going to believe differently. Does it bother you that there are people out there that believe you were a part of a cover-up? Or I see you kind of laughing.
Because the last parade I rode in was a Fiesta Bowl parade. It was so funny because I'm on the horse riding down the street, and this is my last hurrah, literally. And some guy goes, "You're a thief," and I didn't know he was talking to me. And I look over, and he was wearing a particular hat and everything that was pretty clear with his, political affiliation was. And he goes, "You're a thief," and I didn't know what he was talking about, Mike. I had no idea what he meant at first, and I had to think for a second, like, why is he calling me a thief? That's kind of weird. People call me a lot of, unkind things, but not a thief. And I realized what he was referencing. And does it affect me? No, zero. You know why? I always reference my faith, and it says in Scripture, you should not be concerned about winning the approval of men. You should be worried about pleasing your Lord. I know what I know, okay? I did nothing other than enforce the laws, protect people, protect democracy, and did it in a way where I had no investment in the outcomes, only in the outcomes of safety. And anybody who wants to challenge that or criticize or whatever wasn't inside looking out. They were outside looking in. So I can lay my head on the pillow at night every day saying, I did what I knew to be right, and I did it the right way. And anybody who wants to be a critic on it, be damned, because you didn't put the uniform on, the gun, the badge, or anything else. I did. That's kind of like, I don't know, if like my last hurrah thing, I think, on Facebook was the man in the arena. I literally read, are you familiar with that? The man in the arena, right? I read that, and I think they showed themselves because I said, that's how I want to go out. Just saying, for the critics, you weren't the man or the woman in the arena. I was.
So let's talk about some things, and maybe that I don't even know, because I know you, but I don't know you outside. We have a friendship, but I don't know some of these other things. What are some of the things that you do outside of your work? What are some of the things that we'd be surprised by? I mean, you like a karaoke guy? I mean, what is it about you? What is it about you that would surprise us?
I have sung karaoke, but I'm definitely not a karaoke guy. I don't think anybody would be surprised. I think the simplicity of who I am might be most surprising. Like I'd be at the grocery store in shorts and sneakers when I was a sheriff, and people for some reason were surprised, like, "Oh, you look like a regular guy," because I am. That's a job I do, and this is who I am. My family and my faith are very important to me. You know, my wife is wonderful. She's got her own small business. She's very philanthropic. We have 2 sons. My youngest son is recently married and expecting first grandchild. So that is like, I'm over the moon with that whole thing. You know, I keep it simple, buddy. I know what's important to me, and getting home every day and being able to spend time with my family is job one. But we like to travel. We travel all over the world. I like to be involved, whether is in the job or not, in supporting important causes. St. Vincent de Paul, feeding the homeless, you know, caring for children, child health, those types of organizations. So there's nothing that complex or complicated about me, but I will tell you this, you're not going to knock me off my platform. I know who I am and what I stand for, what I believe in, and no amount of money or influence or intimidation is going to move me from that spot.
It's just going to be different now for you, because I share your passion for helping the community. I have a platform in which I love using the platform to do it. And you do now in the aspect of Blue Cross Blue Shield, but as far as your personal platform, you gave that up. I mean, you're not the sheriff anymore.
That was probably the coolest privilege of it, was what you could do with that platform to do good for others outside the lanes of public safety.
So how do you do it? So how do you do it now in your capacity as citizen, Paul Penzone? Does it change how you and your wife do it?
It doesn't change the level of effort or commitment, you know, or whether it be us sharing our you know, financial commitment, sharing our time, our treasures, our talents, as they say. I just think that you have to humble yourself, man. You know, I think that you have to have humility and recognize that for me, being the sheriff was a window in time that was incredible. But it's so much better to choose when that time ends versus let somebody choose it for you. But that doesn't mean that you can stop giving, because it's not so much, you know, again, it's not the capacity of what you can give because of where you are. It's the sacrifice in your giving on how it affects you. How much of yourself can you give versus, you know, like if tomorrow you said Bill Gates has decided he wants you to give away his money. No, that's great, but that ain't coming up. That's no skin in the game for me. I'm giving away billions of dollars to some other guy's money. Bill Gates, the billionaire, not Bill Gates, the board of supervisors.
Not the supervisor.
Just for clarity, I guess I should have used some other example.
That's great news, because Bill Gates, the supervisor,
he's like,
watches
why are you giving my money away? Okay, so find some other billionaire, you know.
Okay, fair enough. Bob Parsons.
Yes. So if I'm giving away or Blue Cross's money, that's wonderful that I can do that. I can be a decision maker on how that money could be or should be spent. But what sacrifice is that for me personally? My family, my wife and I, our boys believe in sacrifice. So I think that it still, in its way, has impact. It has value. It is personal. It is intimate. And as long as you do it from that capacity, it's meaningful. So, you know, being the sheriff, it was cool.
We started something a couple of years ago, post-COVID, so about a year or so ago, called the Action Alliance. And Julia, my producer, and I worked really hard on this. And the people, Eileen behind the scenes, does all our community service stuff. And the purpose was to give people a vehicle to do community service work. So we would go to St. Vincent de Paul, who I love. We'd go to St. Mary's Food Bank, United Food Bank, other organizations. And for many people, it was the first time they'd ever done something like that. And to watch their expression change, to see the amount of need, and then to see how appreciated it can be and how much it's needed in our community, to watch people change for the first time and see that, it does more for you than any time you think you're going to go and do something nice for someone, and you leave there feeling like you received so much more than you gave.
That's the wild part of that. It really is. It's so rewarding on a level that you can't measure. That giving is really a get. I actually tried to implement on the tail end of my term. We used to meet every Tuesday, the executive team, which is like, I don't know, 15 chiefs and there's directors and others, about 20 people in the room. And I said, you know, next month on this date, we'd meet every week, but I just gave them a month's notice. Wear something comfortable, because we're going on a field trip here at 5:30 in the morning, and I had the bus lined up, and I took them all to St. Vincent de Paul, and I basically obligated my staff to feed the homeless because I needed them to look in the eyes of people that are living on the streets and see them as human. I needed them to humble themselves and feed someone who wasn't fed. And then I said, okay, now we're going to rotate and go through all the chiefs. So every, once a quarter, once whatever the heck is appropriate, next man or woman up, you choose what's important to you, and that's where we're going to go volunteer our time. I don't know where it exists now, if they're going to continue to do it or not. But for me, I thought it mattered because it's a humbling moment where you realize, there for the grace of God go I. What if you were on the other side of it? Wouldn't you know that somebody who has this power of authority and privilege of being in law enforcement cares enough to still feed you a warm meal?
And for us, we took a group at St. Vincent de Paul at their the kitchen at Cass downtown.
Yeah,
and prepare the meal. Everybody's having a good time, and I love the fact that they are so efficient. They've got a job for everybody, and you work hard, but it's an efficient, prepare the meal, get it set up, cafeteria style, and set the tables up, water and condiments on the tables and stuff. And then when the doors open, you can see the people that had never done it before. The wave of humanity, who this may be the only real meal they have all day. Yeah. And it seems like the line is never going to end. And you can see their demeanor change. And then to see them interact and sit with someone and have a conversation where that barrier of homelessness and that face you see is different. It is life-changing for people to have them see the humanity in all of that. So I can imagine for someone that may someday in a uniform have the job of interacting with someone maybe that ends in an arrest, but to see them differently, it's got to be life-changing for them. And
it puts everybody on an even playing field, right? You're a member of a team when you're, like you said, I don't care you walk into their sheriff, you're going to set salt and pepper on the table all the way across the thing, okay? And this other person you brought with you is going to do A, B, C, and D. Like, you're part of something that is greater than self. I'll give you another example. So my wife, who owns a hair salon, would go to Circle the City.
Yeah.
And they would give haircuts. So Circle the City is for homeless people who have medical needs, right? They take them off the street.
The stuff they do is incredible.
And she would be in there. It was kind of funny because I did as a sheriff. She'd be in there with her team cutting hair, and I would sweep the hair off the floor to just, contribute while we're there. But when you hear the stories of the people, because they don't know who you are.
No.
They know that there's some really nice people that came in to cut their hair, and there's a guy who happens to be sweeping the floor, and they don't, they're in a desperate time, and they're just thankful. But you hear their stories. Soldiers who were in the military, people that had, strong, legitimate jobs, and what would the proper term be? Just like unfortunate circumstances that led to a snowball downhill. Suddenly they're homeless. And you're like, well, hold on a second. So you were a contractor building homes, and you broke your leg, and you got 2 paychecks behind and lost your house and A, B, C, and D.
Now all of a sudden you're in your car.
Exactly. And you're and all, and we're caring for you. Now, that's not everybody's story. It's not like some kind of, oh my gosh, because for some people it was bad decisions and drugs or whatever. But at the end of the day, there's still a human soul in there. And that's all you're doing is serving the human soul. So that was one of my favorite things to do also, and to watch my wife and her team lead the way by caring for everybody.
Well, Marty Hames.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Marty, who's introduced me to Circle the City, and we went around one day, and we went to the respite center that they have, and she explained to me, and the concept I never even thought of, but she said, we have this place that when people are getting treatment, like if you're getting cancer treatment, you have a place to stay while you're going through treatment. She said, could you imagine having to go through chemo and or radiation therapy, and then when your therapy session is over, go back out on the street? And I thought, no, I can't conceive it. But there's a difference between, in my opinion, I think it's great when people donate. It's a valuable thing. But there's a difference when you're serving the need. When you're there sweeping the hair up off the floor, or you're serving the meals and you're watching the people that are in need, when you are face to face with it, it's different. It changes you, or at least hopefully it changes you.
Well, there is something that, in my opinion, is more powerful than money, a treasure, or whatever, and it's just human dignity. When you are face to face with somebody and you just happen to be in a stable position and healthy with a home and everything like that, and you are there to give respect, let's go right back to where I started. Give respect to somebody as a gift, to say that you matter. Your life is valuable. What you're going through, you don't have to go through alone. We're here to be with you. I don't know there's any greater thing that you can share with somebody than to just give them dignity and respect. And that's all you're doing in those moments. So if you haven't, it's not like we're a PSA right now for service, but it's just true, man, because I'm going to tell you something. the Grim Reaper comes for all of us at some point in time. You don't know when.
And
what you do between now and then matters.
And when you hear the stories of how people ended up in that circumstance, like you said before, you realize how fortunate, how blessed you are.
Yeah.
Because if not for a couple of circumstantial changes, that could definitely be me.
So how much longer are we got, by the way?
We got as much time as you want.
I'm going to share the story with you because this is crazy. This is one of those defining crossroads, right? I was a junior in high school, and it was like graduation night for all the seniors. And I'm out with a friend of mine, and we're running around. There's just graduation parties. Excuse me. And we ended up going to this, I don't know, it was like a hotel or whatever, where they were having some party and everything there. And my buddy's older brother was there, who happened to have a drug problem. But when you're in high school, you don't even know what that means, right? And he's like, hey, Paul, come here. I'm like, what's up? And he brings me to the bathroom, which I think is weird to start with. And on the toilet seat, he had lines of cocaine cut. And he goes, here, man, go ahead. And I go, I'm good, man. Thanks. And I didn't, like, peer pressure can be a really powerful thing, right? So I'm in there with people that I know, and he's trying to make this like, okay, like, here you go, celebrate with us, you know, and he's got lines of cocaine. And I just tell you, it was a guardian angel looking out for me that just said, just walk away, man, walk away. I'm like, I'm good, man, thank you. And I walked away, and I look back, and at that stage in your life, 17, 18, whatever it was, it is really easy to make the wrong decision. And I'm not saying that anybody who's made the wrong decision is bad or unworthy or anything like that, but how much different would my life have been if I stuck my nose to a toilet seat in a hotel room somewhere to ingest cocaine at that stage of my life? How much different would my life be? So when we talk about the circumstances, I could look at somebody who has been homeless because of a drug addiction, had their problems or whatever, and I could think at some point in time they were 17 or 18 and had the world ahead of them, an opportunity, and because of the circumstances made one bad decision that led them here. What can I do to just give something back to them to let them know that doesn't mean that their life has no value, they're not worth
and the
anything.
Value in that, in knowing that, for me, not for what it does for that other person selfishly, to never ever lose sight of the fact that if I had made one or two decisions differently, or if something had happened, I grew up, my mom was very, very poor when we were growing up, and had there been a major breakdown in her car, we that would have been us. That all it would have taken.
Yeah. Sliding door moment, or whatever they call it.
And you look at that and you think, okay, so now it takes away the stigma, and now I'm having a conversation with someone that's explaining their story, and now I feel a relationship with this person that could be me, and they could be me.
Sure.
I could be them, they could be me, and it changes everything. And I think there's such value in that, because it helps us want to make it a better place, but it helps us appreciate where we are.
Yeah, you just got to live life with gratitude, I think, with your circumstances, because when you start looking at others and what they have, and you think that you want that, need that, deserve that, whatever it may be, you lose sight of the moment you're in and how lucky you are.
Listen, I love all of our conversations, but you coming in here and doing this is exactly why we're doing these stories, because it's from every aspect of life and learning so much more about you, not just about what you've done, but why you've done it. I think a lot of people don't know this about you, and I'm glad you're able to share that side of you about the motivation for the things you've done, because a lot of people respect or maybe dislike some of the things you've done, but I think they have to appreciate your motivation.
No, you've always been I say good friend. It's so funny because our window of friendship has been unique. There's certain circumstances that led us to this space. But the one thing I always appreciated, Mike, is that we would have an honest conversation. You ask me the questions that need to be asked. You're always fair with it. You would tell me if you don't like something, you tell me you like something, but you've given me the opportunity to communicate with people on a different scale. And I don't try to change minds. I tell people, listen, there are people that be like, man, that guy's an a-hole. And I'm like, you don't even know me, but now I'm going to come up and introduce myself. And when I'm gone, you can tell people that you know for a fact I'm an a-hole, where 5 minutes ago you were just assuming I was. Right. So I'm not trying to win you over, but you will know who I am and what I stand for.
You can confirm it for people.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
You were saying some unkind things about me before you knew me. Now you can justify it. But
I'm going to steal that, by the way, when I speak in public. That's a great analogy.
Yeah, I actually said that to a guy one time because I heard he was saying some things when I didn't know him. I went and said, hey, how you doing? I'm Paul. This is before I was sheriff. I said, here he's been saying some unkind things about, blah, blah, blah. And I said, before you thought I was one, now you know I am, so have fun with it from here. But it's not like I'm trying to be that to anybody. I'm not trying to be your hero. I'm just being me, man. We all got our own walk. So I try not to cast stones and try to Stay true to who I am.
Well, I can't wait. Personally, I can't wait to see what you do in this new job. I think it's going to be amazing. I think you're going to do great things for Blue Cross Blue Shield and the community. And I just hope we get to see each other more often.
We will, buddy. I promise. And I promise to buy you a beer. I'm going to get you out and buy you a beer.
Perfect. Paul Penzone. Thanks, man.
God bless, big man.